While rarer now, back in the 90s, the logo of a developer was a guarantee that the game in question would be wonderful. So here are some great developers that I've played in the past on the channel, who have had 3 great games in a row. Remedy. Remedy are a Finnish developer formed out of the demo scene group Future Crew. They had been programming games since the 80s, so that would explain why their first release, Death Rally, was such a polished product. By the early 2000s, the company had secured a publication deal with some Scottish dev called Rockstar, and they released Max Payne, a gritty, hard-boiled third-person shooter with comic book interludes. The design aesthetics coupled with a bullet time mechanic, adaptive AI, and excellent movement dripped straight from John Woo movies wowed the public and pushed the genre into new realms. They followed it up with more of the same with a sequel, which means not only did they have 3 brilliant games in a row, those were their first 3 games period. No wonder they're still going strong after all this time. Parallax Software. Parallax became Volition later in life, but it was their final title under their original name that completes the trilogy. Descent Maximum was a PlayStation-only version of Descent 2 that had a different name and different levels. Other than that, it was pretty much the same formula. Parallax arrived, released 3 great Descent games, didn't elaborate further, and then left to become Volition, which they still are to this day. Bethesda Softworks. Everyone knows who Bethesda are now thanks to the Elder Scrolls, but they developed all kinds of titles outside of the RPG genre, involving hockey and racing and basketball. What this also means is that for every Morrowind, there's a Skip Barber Racing. Fortunately, there was a period with their newly built pre-Gamebryo X engine that Bethesda focused on 2 series, The Elder Scrolls and their licensed Terminator shooters. Future Shock and Skynet didn't get wonderful remasters like other 90s classics, but back in the day, those shooters were cutting edge. More importantly, rounding off these 2 titles was the second Elder Scrolls game, Daggerfall. A wonderful open-world RPG that launched the company to even greater heights despite its bugs. Totally Games. Lawrence Holland's flight sim developer, under the loving wing of LucasArts, produced some of the finest DOS games ever made. Then made the hyperspace jump into 3D acceleration and Windows by effortlessly spawning 2 more great titles in upgraded engines. The Star Wars space combat sims were a narrative-heavy direct competitor of Chris Roberts' Wing Commander series, and they're fondly remembered with good reason, sporting magnificent plots and deviously difficult missions. So in actuality, you're looking at 4 brilliant games in a row at the bare minimum from this incredible company. They also made the Luftwaffe games and Bridge Commander, so you could extend that even further if you're feeling generous and have a soft spot for Star Trek or early flight sims. Sierra. You know the deal with Sierra, developer of classic point-and-click adventure games, because they pretty much invented the genre thanks to being founded by Roberta Williams. They were also a publisher, and developed a load of titles outside of that particular genre too. So for every great King's Quest game, there's a random card game that nobody remembers. Fortunately, their early 90s period was so prolific that it's impossible not to find at least 3 brilliant games in a row. In this case, it was their excellent VGA remake of Space Quest, where you play a dim-witted janitor who must save the galaxy from evil aliens. Their beautiful murder mystery, The Dagger of Ammon-Ra, and the pick of the bunch, King's Quest VI, the best fantasy-based point-and-click adventure ever crafted. LucasArts. And like fine wine and a cheese board, the names of Sierra and LucasArts are entirely inseparable and complementary when talking about the genre. Loom showcased the incredible strides the company had made with their Scum interpreter/engine, and it was followed up by 2 of the greatest comedic adventure games in gaming history, introducing Monkey Island, with these entries bookended by the 2 Indiana Jones adventure titles. So it really is a case of take your pick, you're spoilt for choice. New World Computing. Between Heroes of Might and Magic 2 through to Might and Magic 8, the world of Enroth enchanted both RPG and strategy fans alike for hundreds if not thousands of hours. So why am I not including the second one in my string of 3 brilliant games in a row? Because New World Computing also thought it was very important to release Vegas Games 2000. What's that? It was a cash grab casino title that was once described as overwhelmingly ugly. Fortunately, they decided to continue making Might and Magic games on the side, and Might and Magic 6 may well be the best free-roaming blobber ever created, followed up by Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which may well be the best turn-based fantasy strategy game ever created. To top things off, they released the 7th Might and Magic title, a streamlined and upgraded sequel to the 6th, and it was also wonderful. They even released the in-universe card game as a standalone title, because all the best RPGs have addictive gambling minigames. Blizzard Entertainment. Remember when Blizzard made good games? The Blizzard I miss is the one from the 90s, when their days as a porter had just finished and they had started releasing independently, and about everything they touched from that mid-90s period onwards was either great or an all-time classic. A run of 8 games in a row from Warcraft 2 all the way through to World of Warcraft, assisted somewhat by Condor and their Diablo series, before they were absorbed as Blizzard North. Even excluding those, you've got StarCraft and Warcraft 3, leading into World of Warcraft. Don't let hindsight discourage you from revisiting their classic titles. id Software. Over a period of 2.5 years, the classic lineup of id Software released Doom, Doom 2, and Quake in succession. It took modern day id almost 4 years between Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, which is about the same amount of time it took for Romero and Carmack to release every single first-person shooter they would make together. What, you wanted this to be longer? Of course id was going to be here. Doom and Quake are kind of good, you know. Dynamics. To develop 3 amazing games in a row is an incredible feat. To do it twice is even more remarkable, and that's precisely what Sierra's pals at Dynamics did. Red Baron is a World War flight sim that had a permanent place in PC Gamer's top 100 lists through the 90s. A gripping title that truly captured what it's like to fly in those crazy early combat flights. Rise of the Dragon came out of nowhere for me and amazed and impressed. A real-time cyberpunk adventure game with pulp comic style and a million ways to lose. This was followed up by Willy Beamish, which stayed in the same genre but with a much more light-hearted and family-friendly tone. By 1993, Dynamics was on fire, releasing one of the best RPGs of all time in Betrayal at Krondor, taking over the adventures of Roger Wilco with Space Quest V, helping Joe Ybarra produce Alien Legacy, and even dominating the sports market with Front Page Sports Football Pro. Unfortunately, no amount of good games could save the company from the same fate as its publisher Sierra. A sad ending to a great company with a lovely theme. Dynamics. Bullfrog Productions. Syndicate was a real-time tactics game with lots of shooting and cybernetic enhancement, and it kept the company's momentum going after their enormous success with Populous. They followed that up with Magic Carpet, which was a first-person game unlike any other. Finally, and in the same year, they came out with Theme Park, a business management sim about a theme park, and that kicked off a whole genre of roller coaster based games. Not happy with doing this a single time, Bullfrog released Theme Hospital and Dungeon Keeper in the same year, 1997, then capped it off with bringing their previous Populous games into the 3D realm. What I'm trying to say here is that Bullfrog released 10 classic games over the course of 10 years, which is something most publishers don't manage, let alone a single developer, probably why EA gobbled them up. Speaking of which, Origin Systems. On 2 separate occasions, Origin Systems, founded by Richard and his brother Robert, published Wing Commander and Ultima titles back to back. The first Wing Commander game was followed up by Ultima 6 and the Savage Empire. They released deluxe versions of Wing Commander 1 and 2 between Ultima 7 The Black Gate and the series Zenith. As if that wasn't enough, they also published an entirely different Ultima game, whose lasting impact would be greater than either of the other series combined. But this wasn't made by them. It was created by Looking Glass Studios. Whether they were called Learner Research, Blue Sky Productions, Looking Glass Technologies, or Looking Glass Studios, they're one of the most important companies in gaming history and criminally underrated both by the public and by me until recently. You see, almost every game they made from the late 80s through to the year 2000 was good, and though they became more famously known for creating the immersive sim, they operated in all kinds of genres. Whether it was combat flight sims, racing games, or sporting titles, they were critically acclaimed and with good reason. But setting these aside for the moment, the obvious jewel of their crown were the series of immersive titles. Ultima Underworld, the System Shock series, the first two Thief games, and the subsequent inspiration those titles created changed the industry forever. By my count, there are 3 times this studio released 3 great games in a row, but who did the what and the where and the how of it is a hodgepodge of conflicting interviews and information. But let's be realistic here. No other studio is going to have 3 separate occasions where they released 3 Westwood studios. Westwood Associates did a lot of work for Disney, ported other people's games, and eventually created the brilliant D&D RPG Eye of the Beholder. When they renamed themselves as Westwood Studios, the real fun began. Some people don't realise just how good Westwood were. Legend of Kyrandia has been covered multiple times on this channel. It's a brilliant, albeit frustrating, point-and-click adventure game. Dune 2 has been covered even more, and it's the progenitor of the RTS genre as we know it, and one of the most important games ever. Lands of Lore is possibly the greatest grid-based blobber ever made. It doesn't stop there though. Remember The Lion King? That was a fun platformer. That was also Westwood. Some of you might remember playing Monopoly on Windows. I sure do. That was Westwood as well. Command & Conquer, also covered endlessly on this channel, was the next game. Red Alert was their next one, so obviously that went down well. Guardians of Destiny was a brilliant sequel that differed greatly from the original, and the third game to complete the set? Oh, only Blade Runner, one of the greatest adventure games of all time. Such was the strength of Westwood's development team that even after EA came calling and bought them out, they still released underrated action RPG Nox, and 2 more great Command & Conquer games in Tiberian Sun and Red Alert 2. Don't ever forget that there was a time in the 90s when all of these people were firing on all cylinders, and you could expect bona fide classics month in and month out if you were an informed gamer with enough money at hand. And if you enjoyed me randomly rambling about gaming, feel free to look at this playlist of my scripted videos, or just visit the channel in general. I've got a lot of stuff on there from yesteryear that you might enjoy. Until next time.